From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. The Alabama legislature resumed its 2023 regular session today. It's just day 2 of the session as members of House and Senate gathered in their respective chambers this afternoon. There were no bills to consider, though, because nothing has made it out of committee. As is required on the second day of session, Governor Kay Ivey released her proposed budgets for the next fiscal year. The proposals came with increased spending in both budgets, plus supplemental appropriations to account for the record surpluses the state is seeing. We'll start in the general fund, which pays for the range of non-education state services. The governor is proposing a $2.9 billion spending plan, a record high for the general fund. Many agencies are seeing significant increases. Medicaid would see a $69 million increase to account for the drop-off in federal funding since the pandemic. The Department of Corrections would see a $58 million increase, much of which is used to cover the cost of a new health care contract. In supplemental appropriations, $40 million would go to debt service and $50 million would go to the general fund rainy day account. The governor's proposed education trust fund totals $8.8 billion, another record amount for this budget, covering everything from pre-K to higher ed, plus related agencies' expenses. K-12 education would see a $337 million increase. That includes what goes to local school systems and a 2% pay raise for teachers. Community colleges would receive an additional $33 million compared to last year, and colleges and universities would see a $102.7 million increase. The lion's share of the proposed supplemental appropriation bill for the ETF would go to a one-time tax rebate. You'll remember Ivey mentioned this in her State of the State speech 2 weeks ago. Under her proposal, single tax filers would get a one-time payment of $400, and a family of 4 would get $800. According to the proposed legislation, it would cost a total $966.7 million. State Finance Director Bill Poole held a briefing with reporters today to go over the budget proposals. He explained that the tax rebate, if approved, could be sent out to taxpayers within 60 to 90 days.
The governor's proposed rebate will focus on filers. So to the extent these are excess funds received by the state, paid in by taxpayers, returning those to the taxpayers and the filers was the most efficient and effective way to administer those funds back to the taxpayers. So it will focus on filers.
In other legislative action, there was a public hearing today on a bill dealing with occupational taxes. The proposal from State Senator Andrew Jones of Gadsden would reduce all municipal occupational taxes to 1% through a gradual annual reduction. Jones has carried similar legislation in the past. He said that even though municipalities who count on such taxes will oppose it, he is determined to move forward.
Can we agree that if you're employed by a company and you don't even work at headquarters part of the week, you work at home, do we not all agree that you shouldn't have your wages taxed as if you've been working in the city for the entire time? Can we not agree that when first responders come in to restore power in a county after tornadoes, that they shouldn't, coming in for mutual aid, that they shouldn't have had to have 2%, 1%, 1.5% of their salaries taken out when they came to the aid of their fellow man in Alabama? Can we not agree that it is onerous for a business? Take Etowah County, for example. You own a tow truck business. You run calls in Attala, Glencoe, Gadsden, Southside, Rainbow City. You have to keep up with the hours that your people work in each city so that you can remit occupational taxes to those cities. Can we not agree that that is overreach and bureaucracy and red tape at its worst?
That bill advanced through the Senate, County, and Municipal Government Committee and now goes to the full Senate. Senate Democrats, led by State Senator Vivian Figures of Mobile, held a news conference today announcing 2 measures meant to address Alabama's abortion law. Senate Bill 34 would repeal the Alabama Human Life Protection Act of 2019, which only allows abortion in the case of a serious health risk to the mother. Senate Bill 35 would amend the law to allow abortion in cases of rape and incest. Figures said she was not confident her bills would advance in a Republican-controlled legislature, but that it was important to keep fighting for women's rights.
I introduced these bills to reignite the conversation around the issue of women's rights. It needs to be dealt with so that we, as a state, can put something in place that is more palatable for all women. March is Women's History Month, and unfortunately, women have had a long history of not having the same rights as men. Women deserve to have the same rights as men. When the Human Life Protection Act was passed, it took away the rights of women to choose and to make individual medical decisions concerning their bodies. All women want is to have the same rights as men and to have access to safe abortions should that be their choice. There is no law in the United States of America that mandates what a man can or cannot do with his own body. God gives us all free will, but Alabama has even taken that away from women.
We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next via Zoom from Washington is U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville. Coach, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Good to see you.
Well, we reported last night on this Vulcan situation where the Mexican police and military forces seizing Vulcan's property down there, a port and a quarry. We also aired your comments from the Senate floor talking about this. This has been an issue you've been involved in for a while. Can you kind of give us the lay of the land?
Yeah, Todd, it's been going on for, I guess, well over a year. And, what's happened here is Vulcan Materials, really out of Birmingham, has got other factories all over the world. But for the past 30 years, they've been operating a limestone mine on the Gulf side down in Mexico. And, their investments, well-paying jobs for the region, paying a lot of taxes to Mexico. And it's been huge for the supply chain all over our country and even other countries. And so I urge the Biden administration to stand up to Mexico and, for companies like Vulcan. Problem is we have had very little communication with the White House for a year. Senator Shelby and I, we sent a letter to Secretary Blinken and told him the situation. And that was a year ago, February. And then in May last year, we joined with another letter, President Biden, to Blinken and to Secretary Raimondo of the Secretary of Commerce, after the first letter went unanswered. And the problem was, Vulcan kept having all these problems. So also, as you said, and have probably played some of my comments off the speech that I gave on the Senate floor. So in August, I addressed the situation in a call to Ken Salazar. He's our U.S. ambassador to Mexico. Mm-hmm. He said he didn't want to really intervene, but he promised to monitor the situation. Well, the situation has gotten worse. Tom Hill, who's the CEO of Vulcan, doing a great job, got a great company. I've known Vulcan for 25 years when Mr. Ireland was also involved in it. And but we're maintaining communication with Vulcan. We're maintaining communication with our ambassador in Mexico. We're trying to get the people here in the White House to help us, but we're getting very, very little help. And it is a mess. And again, last week they got broke into again by Mexican authorities after I think it basically went to a court, an international court, and they're not going to let it go. Mexico's not. And so it's a bad situation.
Well, what strikes me about this is that this is Mexico. This is not Venezuela. This is not Cuba. This is Mexico, our largest trading partner, I'm pretty sure, our, ostensible ally, our neighbor to the south. So you'd think that kind of thing wouldn't happen in one of our closest nations. And you mentioned the Biden administration, mentioned some, not hearing back. What's it going to take to sort of get their attention? And is there any indication that now that this video is out there, now that it's pretty dramatic, and y'all have been outspoken, that the Biden administration might do more to get in touch with Mexico to be tougher towards this land grab?
Well, as you said, this is not a third world country in Mexico. They're our biggest trade partners. They're next door to us. The Biden administration, everything they've done since I've been here in 2 years, ever since he's been in office, they've been a day late and a dollar short. Same things happened over in Ukraine, happened in Afghanistan, everything they're behind on. And it seems like they just can't make a decision. But we have to have help here. And as you just said, this is a tough situation, Vulcan. It's a tough situation for a lot of companies down in Mexico. I just returned from Panama, which is below Mexico. I went down to look at the Panama Canal, talked to the administration down there, talked to the ambassadors, their security people, and they're trying to be overrun by China as we speak. China's in Panama building things. They're breaking contracts with China. Panama is as we speak because they can't do anything right. But you can just imagine this deep water port that Vulcan has, just right up the Caribbean or the Gulf from Panama, and it's going to be a good possibility that one day, if Vulcan cannot return this to their property, that a good possibility that it could go into China's hands, because Mexico doesn't have use for a port. They don't have the trade. So could be some problems in the future if we don't rectify it now. And again, the only way we can get this done and get a closure to this is the Biden administration is going to have to get involved. But it's like pulling teeth.
Well, wow, maybe some geopolitics at play here. I mean, you're right. I mean, China has been active not just in Central and South America, all over Africa, all about materials, things like that. So that's a really interesting angle. Senator, while I have you, I wanted to switch gears and talk about the issue of Title IX. You've been outspoken about this issue, about the need to protect Title IX. There's a rule going forward in the Department of Education having to do with transgender youth and whether or not they should be allowed to play on sports teams. It's kind of coming up. It could be active in May. I know you have some legislation having to do with this issue. What would it do?
Well, first of all, since I've been here in 2 years, I've seen nothing but attacks on family and gender. I don't know where this administration is going, or the left. Democrats have basically lost their mind. And Title IX is one of the few things that we've gotten right up here, or the federal government's gotten right in the last 50 years, because it really enhanced girls and women's sports, give them a lot of opportunities. 50 years ago, it was basically non-existent, but it's done so much for girls and women in this country. But now we're having a problem because this administration in May has passed a policy where if in a school, whether it's higher education or secondary education, if you don't allow transgender biological boys to participate in women's sports, they're going to basically cut your money off. And it's nuts, to be honest with you. And what that's going to do, it's going to really affect Title IX, because you're going to have young girls and even women say, hey, I'm not competing for second or third or fourth. That's not what this is about. There's no reason that this country should allow transgender biological boys to participate because of their size, their strength, their lung capacity. There's no reason for them to compete in women's sports. They've got a side of sports they can compete on themselves. So if you were born a biological boy, you shouldn't be able to compete against them. And I've got what's called the Women Protect Women in Sports Act, a bill that I put on the floor. Of course, this group's not going to let it on the floor. They don't want to pass.
I was going to ask you if there was any support from the Democrats on it, because it would take them to help.
No, it's Joe Manchin's helping. You got a couple of others that's looking at it, but they don't want to create ways for the far left. They're scared of the far left up here because they're afraid they'll lose their votes. This is all about getting reelected up here. I mean, it's all they do. They don't do anything for the country or their state. They do everything for their party to where they can retain power and continue to screw everything up. Bottom line. And, I get sick of listening to it every day, but this is really over the top, allowing boys and men that were biologically born as a male to participate in women's sports. There's no reason for this to happen. And we can't get any reasoning from the left. They just want it to happen. They want to tear down gender and family. And God is never mentioned up here, Todd, and that's very, very concerning.
Well, we'll have to leave it there because we're out of time. But again, Senator, thank you for your time and for coming on Capitol Journal and talking about some of these issues.
Thank you, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
The city of Coleman was founded by Bavarian native Johann Coleman in 1873, when he convinced 15 other German families in Ohio to move with him to new land he had purchased in Alabama. Within a few short years, thousands of German immigrants came to the newly settled town. Every year, the city of Coleman continues to celebrate its German roots with a week-long Oktoberfest celebration.
Joining me next is State Treasurer Young Boozer. Mr. Boozer, thanks for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. Good to be here.
Well, it's apropos because as part of the special session that just ended last week, of course, it was all about ARPA and everything, but a big part of that was paying back, finally, the last payment to the Alabama Trust Fund. This is, was borrowed years ago during difficult financial times to fill some budget holes. They made the final payment for the ATF. Were you pleased to see that, I'm guessing?
I'm still celebrating. Are you kidding me? It's been fantastic. And it was a long time ago. It was right after I got elected the first time in 2012 that Arthur Orr and I got together. And we both had concerns about the Alabama Trust Fund and how it was operated and how it paid out, and are we getting as much cash flow out of it on an annual basis as we should. And so we got together and said there need to be some significant changes in it. We got together, we came up with the plan that would capture all of those revenues that are coming from natural gas royalties and Mobile, come into the trust. We changed the way that we managed it, so it was managed according to techniques and philosophies in the 21st century. And the other thing that we did was we established a spending policy, which never had really been formalized in the past. It was kind of a harem-scarum type thing, trying to figure out how much you were going to get each year. But we basically put in a formula that used a 3-year rolling average of the balance of the investment portfolio, and then paid out a certain percentage of that, so that 2 years in advance we would know exactly how much money we were going to get.
Makes it easier to budget.
Simplifies the budgeting process.
Yeah.
And it also increased the amount that we were paying out, which was a great benefit at that time, because if you'll recall, we went through prorations twice during those time periods. So that's what it did. Now the interesting thing is that was what we designed, and that was what we had planned in the constitutional amendment that we were working on. But at the 11th hour, some folks came up and said, you know what, we need some help. And that help is in the terms of $437 million that we're going to take out at the same time. And we said, how about if we come up with an alternative? And we suggested a couple of things. One of the things was to loan them the money interest-free, and then have a certain scheduled repayment. But that was rejected. And it was rejected for only a short period of time, because it went to vote, it was approved, and a couple of weeks after the approval, the blowback was so big from a political point of view about taking that money out that the pledge was made for the first bill in the 2013 session to be the Alabama Trust Fund repayment. And that set up this schedule of payments that we have been receiving over all these years. And so what you're referring to that happened last week is the prepayment of all of the rest of the payments that were going to be made. So we now have all of that cash. We don't have to worry about repayments of anything else in the future, and we got the funds back to the Alabama Trust Fund.
Well, I think that's good news for everybody. But let me ask you just in general about the health of the ATF and the other assets that you manage as state treasurer.
Okay. The ATF is in good shape. This last year was a terrible year in investments. Everybody had a loss. And the interesting thing about it is what was lost in 2022 was pretty much the entire gain of 2021. So if you look at where we are, we're back where we would have been in 2020. So we had a huge gain in 21, lost it all in 22, and now we're back here. And we got about $3.3 billion in the investment portfolio. We also manage about $500 million for cities and counties. We also have a portfolio for Forever Wild, and of course we fund Forever Wild on an annual basis. And speaking of funding, the spending policy that we have is set out so that we know exactly how much total is going to go out, and then it's divided up into, for the most part, the general fund and then some other funds. Forever Wild, senior services, and some other things. Cities and counties get a portion of that.
Well, speaking of cities and counties, I know that you have a bill on the legislature this year, you're planning a bill allowing maybe a way to help cities and counties pool their money and invest and get a return.
Yes. We're basing this on our experience over the last 18 months. So when I came back in the office 18 months ago, we had our investment portfolio. Interest rates were only 50 basis points, and since then the portfolio has grown in volume dramatically. This morning the total pool was about $13.2 billion, and interest rates have gone from 50 basis points up to 4.5%, 450 basis points. So it's a huge increase, and our projected income has increased dramatically. Well, that's because we had the excess cash, interest rates had gone up, and we took advantage of that very prudently. But we did take advantage of it. We were pretty aggressive in how we did it. Well, if we can do that for the state of Alabama, we looked around and said, well, how are other people doing this? 38 other states have an investment pool for local governments. So we just kind of went to school looking at what they do. We think that this is a great idea for public entities, and the definition of a public entity is going to be the same definition that we have in the SAFE Act, so that all matches up. So public entities like cities, counties, school boards, on and on and on, can invest in a program like this, and the idea is to run it as a money market mutual fund, short-term investments, high-quality investments, U.S. agencies and U.S. government securities, managed by the Treasurer's Office. Will manage the portfolio and will invest alongside them so that they'll know that we've got some skin in the game. And we think that this is going to be a great money management tool for these folks who just don't have the access, or they don't have the background to be able to make these kinds of decisions. So this is an option. We got a lot of money from the feds, and we've invested it quickly and prudently. A lot of these cities and counties have just put it in their checking account, and it may not be earning anything. So we're thinking that if we can just take that excess or that additional cash flow from them and invest it, it'll be a benefit to them in a very dramatic way.
How's your feedback been from the localities?
Love it.
Really?
Yes.
Eager to see it?
Yeah.
Well, good. Add that to the list of bills that we will be following.
Okay, good.
Well, we're out of time, unfortunately, but lots of other issues to cover. We'll have you back on when we have more time.
That'd be great. I'd be happy to do that.
State Treasurer Young Boozer, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back.
The USS Alabama is a World War II-era battleship that first served in the Atlantic Theater, but was better known for helping to take Japanese-held islands in the Pacific between 1943 and 1945. During the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Alabama's state-of-the-art radar alerted the fleet to incoming aircraft, providing the Americans enough time to scramble fighters and decimate the attacking force. Later, the Alabama served during the Battle of Leyte Gulf and anchored in Tokyo Bay to unload Allied occupation forces. In 1964, the state of Alabama took possession of the battleship. Alabama schoolchildren raised $100,000 in nickels and dimes to help bring the ship to Mobile and create Battleship Memorial Park. The park features the Alabama, the World War II-era submarine USS Drum, and an American military aircraft collection. Battleship Memorial Park is one of the state's most visited attractions.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 10:30 for more coverage of the legislative session right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.